Good morning, fellows, and welcome to another class. Today, we'll be looking at ion formation. In other words, we'll be looking at how ions are formed. So, first, we know what atoms are, and we also know that atoms can become ions. How do atoms become ions? So, they become ions when they are charged. That's why ions are charged atoms. So, that's what ions are, and they are formed from atoms. Now, two things happen in the formation of ions. So, atoms, main things can happen to atoms in order to form ions. So, the first thing is that they can either gain electrons, and the second thing is that they can lose electrons. So, atoms can gain electrons to form ions, can lose electrons to form ions. When atoms gain electrons, they form anions. And when atoms lose electrons, they form cations. So we're going to look at how these two processes can result in the formation of these two types of ions. We'll first start by looking at how anions are formed when atoms gain electrons. So anion formation. So first, we've established that they are formed when atoms gain electrons. Okay, so let's look at an example to illustrate this. Let's take the atom, for example, chlorine. Chlorine has atomic number of 17, which means that it has 17 electrons and 17 protons. So if we are to draw the electronic configuration or even write the electronic configuration of chlorine, it will look like this. It will be 2 and 7. So that's the electronic configuration of chlorine. So let's use this to draw the structure of chlorine. It will look like this. Of course, it has a nucleus. The first shell will have 2 electrons. Now the second shell will have 8 electrons there. Then we have the third shell having how many? 7 electrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so the focus should be on the last shell. And usually in ion formation, the focus should mainly be on the final shell, which we call the valence shell. So the electrons in the last shell, we also call them the valence electrons. So our focus is on the valence electrons. In the case of chlorine, the valence electrons are 7. So that's where you're going to focus on. Now, before atoms can form ions, let's look at the valence electrons. And the rule is this: anytime the valence electron is 5 or more, so if the valence electron is 5 or more, what you do is to gain additional electrons. Alright, but make sure as you gain additional electrons, you do not disobey the octet rule. And I remember I've made mention of the octet rule in a previous video. The octet rule is simply saying that that shell should have a maximum of 8 electrons. So the point is this: when you are gaining electrons, make sure you gain only up to 8, so that everything that you get, the total amount of electrons in that final shell should be 8. Right? So in the case of chlorine, it already has 7 electrons in the valence shell, or 7 valence electrons. So for us to obey the octet rule, we need to add one more electron to it for it to obey the octet rule, which means that for us to have 8 electrons in the final shell. So let's do that. So we are going to add one more electron. And because that electron is different, coming from outside, we are going to use circle to represent it. So now chlorine has gained electrons. Alright. And remember the rule is that you only gain when your valence electron is 5 or more. Anything less than that, you lose. In the case of chlorine, it has 7 electrons, which is more than 5, so we have to gain additional electron. It gained 1 electron to obey the octet rule. So now it currently has 8 valence electrons. So let's do some calculating. How many protons has chlorine? Proton of chlorine, it doesn't change. Proton numbers do not change, your atomic numbers do not change. So chlorine would continue to have 17 protons. That it doesn't change. What about electrons? The number of electrons of chlorine used to be just 17. But as you can see from the diagram, one more electron has been added. So it's no more 17. It's currently 18. So chlorine now has gained one more electron. So it's now having 18 electrons. So that's 18. What is the charge of proton? It's positive. So I'll put positive here. What about the charge of electron? It's negative. So I'll put negative here. And let's find the total charge on a net charge of chlorine. 17 positive minus 18 will give us what? Minus 1. So chlorine now has become chlorine minus 1. So that is the charge of chlorine currently. So chlorine atom is chlorine, just chlorine, but which is this one. But chlorine ion, which is an anion, is now chlorine negative 1. So that's how anions are formed. So you gain electrons, additional electrons, form anions. In the case of chlorine, it gained one more electron. That one more electron that was gained became each. So let's quickly look at how cations are formed. So for cation formation, what exactly happens? For you to form cations, electrons should be lost. So electrons, when there is electron lost in an atom, it results in the formation of cations. Let's look at an example to illustrate this. Let's take an atom such as sodium. So we are taking sodium. Its atomic number is 11. If I have to write the electronic configuration of sodium, it will be 2, 10, and 1. If I have to draw this structure, it will look something like this. So first we have the nucleus, that's the nucleus. The first shell has 2 electrons. The second shell has how many? 10. Sorry, I need to correct something. So that's 8. So the second shell has 8 electrons. And the final shell, or the last shell, has how many electrons? It has 1 electron. So that's the structure of sodium. That's how sodium atom looks like. And like we've already said, In ion formation, your focus should be on the valence electron. In the case of sodium, it has one valence electron. That's one electron in the last shell. Now, the rule is this. Anytime an atom has four or less electrons, you have to lose it. Okay, so you lose the electrons, all of it, from the valence shell if the atom has four or less. In the case of sodium, that's only one electron in the last shell. Because it's less than four, what it means that that electron would have to be lost. So when it loses that electron, this one will no more be there. Okay, so the how many electrons does sodium have now? So once it loses that electron, one will now have how many electrons? 10 electrons. But like we've already said, the proton number, it doesn't change. Proton of sodium will always remain constant. It's 11 in this case. Electron number has changed. It's no more 11 because you've lost one. It's now 10. Proton is positive, electron is negative. So let's find the net charge or the total charge. When you add positive 11 to negative 10, you are going to get positive 1. So you see, the charge of sodium is now positive 1. That's 1. So sodium now becomes Na+1. So that's the charge of sodium currently. This sodium atom, this is sodium cation or sodium ion, mainly or specifically cation. So you see, for cations to be formed, atoms would have to lose electrons. So let's quickly summarize what we've just learned. What are cations and what are anions? So simply put, we can say that cations are positively charged ions. How are they formed? That are formed when atoms lose electrons. So we need you to remember this. So cations are positively charged atoms or ions that are formed when atoms lose electrons. What about anions? So anions, the opposite would have been, so anions, they are formed when, or they are negatively charged atoms or ions that are formed when atoms gain electrons. So that's the simple definition for, or those are the simple definitions for cations and anions. And I believe you remember how they are formed and everything. So that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Please subscribe to the channel if you've not already done that. Share the video with your friends. Remember, sharing is caring, and you need to give me thumbs up and everything that you do in YouTube to ensure that the video gets to other people. Thank you very much. Take very good care of yourselves. We'll meet in our next episode. Bye.